Hello and welcome to a new episode of Las Platicas. Who do we have in our Las Platicas Zoom meeting today, Kristen?
Today, we have some really cool people, and I'm so excited. And yes, just like Sarah said, thank you to everybody for joining us for another episode of Las Platicas, which is a show hosted by us, Comadres y Comics podcast, where we meet with creators and friends to talk about upcoming projects, events, and all around awesome news happening in the comic community. So, yes, today we have with us Dave Baker and Nicole Goux. Goo, just like the slimy stuff, she says. Dave is actually part of a creative team as well with Nicole for a book that we're going to talk all about today, and I'm excited for us to go over. But it was a dark horse graphic novel, and it's called Everyone is Tulip. And actually, we've been having people come into the store asking for it, just so you guys know.
Hey.
Exciting.
So Dave is a writer and illustrator based in LA, California. His most recent works include Action Hospital, Fuck Off Squad, which I know I've been to your guys' table at multiple conventions because that title draws me in every time. I'm serious. Night Hunters and Star Trek Voyager 7's Reckoning. He also co-wrote the feature film Alien Warfare, now streaming on Netflix. And Nicole, we really are happy to have you here because I know that there was scheduled last week where schedules got mixed up, but you would not have been able to be here. So I'm so happy that you are here today, and we are very excited to have both of you here. Too bad we just can't have everybody because I know a lot of amazing creativeness went into making this book. But Nicole is a cartoonist and illustrator, also working here in Los Angeles, and is the co-creator of Fuck Off Squad and the artist on DC's Shadow of the Batgirl, which I love those books. So cool. I love the whole YA vibe for all of those books that come out. She's worked with DC Comics, Silver Sprocket Bicycle Club, IDW, and Lionforge, another one of our favorites, and has self-published various works. So welcome, Dave and Nicole. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yay.
Awesome.
Yes. And this is, I think, one of the very first times where everyone that we're talking to like this is actually in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which
Yeah,
makes
Jenna.
this meeting even funnier because we're all technically in Los Angeles.
Yeah. So that is funny. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We love for our guests to share what their quote unquote origin stories are with how they entered into the comic industry. So if you could both introduce yourself, even though I did such a wonderful job doing it myself, but introduce yourself and what your history with comics is and how you began your comics career. So
Yeah.
Dave, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure, yeah. So like you said, my name is Nicole Goux. It's pronounced goo like the oozy stuff from the Ghostbusters. So I've kind of always been obsessed with comics. I found them at a very young age because my local library was stocked full of Hergé's Tintin bande dessinée volumes.
Oh, yeah.
And I was really obsessed with boy adventurer, girl detective, kind of young people solving crimes books as a kid, but I couldn't read yet, obviously. So my parents and my stalwart babysitter would read me, Nancy Drew, Time Warp Trio, Trixie Belden, Hardy Boys style novels. And we were in the library one day, and my mom was like, "Oh, look, this is like one of those weird like kid adventurer things that you like. You want to check this out?" And it was just like being struck by a bolt of lightning. I was like, "Oh my god, what is this? This is amazing. There's a talking dog and a kid with a weird pompadour, and like, what is this?" And it really just kind of was a religious. So the closest thing I have to a religion is comics. Like I really feel that their power for change and cultural impact is just unparalleled. I think it's the greatest art form in the history of mankind. And I basically have been attempting or, in air quotes, succeeding to produce work ever since, where it's, it started out as little shitty X-Men fan comics as a kid and then moved to self-publishing, and now Nicole and I are giving Jeff Lemire and Mike Mignola run for their money.
That's awesome.
That's funny. Nicole, how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, I have read comics since I was a little kid, but I think for a long time it didn't really register that what I was reading was comics, because I read, like newspaper strips. I used to come home from school every single day. First thing I did was grab the funny pages and read the paper, read comics, Garfield, Zits, Family Ties, or that's a show.
Family Circle? Family Circle?
Family Circus, but I actually didn't like Family Circus. What am I thinking of? Well, there's a ton. Baby Blues, all of those. And I think for a long time, I kind of like didn't really register that I was reading comics, or that because in my mind, comics was superhero comics, American comics, that kind of stuff. And then in middle school, I started reading manga, and I got really obsessed with manga and anime, and I was like, I'm gonna move to Japan and be a mangaka, and I realized I didn't know how to write stories or speak Japanese. So, and then like it happens with high school, I kind of drifted into different areas. I wanted to be an animator. I kind of phased out of that, and then I went to art school for illustration, and kind of forgot about the comics thing, because in my mind, comics was still American superhero comics for a long time. And then after college, Dave and I ran into each other. We met, and he asked me, do you want to make a comic with me? I have this 8-page story. And after making that story and then starting to go to some zine fest, where I had this realization of oh, comics is not just this one thing. It's such a broad spectrum of basically any kind of story that you want to tell. Dave and I started making mini comics and going to zine fest, and I just really caught the bug and was like, oh no, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I can do. This is like a place where I can really put my creative outlet into, and been making them ever since, mostly with Dave, but also other places, DC, all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome. I love when
That's
that light
great.
bulb goes off in people's head in the shop, where they come in and they see all of these books on the shelf, and they realize that comics are not just capes and tights, that there's so many amazing, compelling stories that are being told. And I have so many to be able to recommend. And I love when the people have that aha moment.
And then they whisper to themselves, biff, bang, pow. Comics aren't just for kids anymore.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the way it happened.
Every time. Every time.
Well, you guys, tell our listeners about your new book, Everyone is Tulip. What is it? How did you guys go about and develop the story? We'll start off with you, Dave.
Sure. So Everyone is Tulip is a original graphic novel, which I honestly don't like saying. I just usually refer to it as a comic book, but that's a whole other discussion. So it's an original graphic novel about a young woman who moves from Arizona to Los Angeles to try and become an actor, and she kind of gets here and realizes, oh, you don't just walk onto a studio lot and get put in a movie. So she kind of drifts around for a little bit, working in a series of kind of dead-end jobs, and then one day applies for a job on a Craigslist ad for some obtuse art project that she's not quite sure what it is, but they're looking for performers. And based off of an audition that she gets kind of sucked up into this high stakes world of internet performance art, where she plays this character named Tulip in a series of YouTube videos that become wildly, virally popular. And so the book itself is this kind of examination of what does it mean to be a digital creator in the modern age, where content is just a never-ending downpour. You always have to be producing. It's an examination of, as an artist, how does your dreams and how do your goals evolve over the course of making when you're first starting, you have this idea of what it's going to be like, and then you get into it and you've accomplished your dream, but you're instantly confronted with a very treacherous ecosystem of compromises that you never would have imagined, and quite frankly aren't equipped to deal with. And so our book follows a little nucleus of characters that kind of orbit Becca as she's working her way through this kind of seedy underbelly of internet content creation and Hollywood adjacent fame. And it's like 160 something pages. Nicole drew it, I wrote it, and it was colored by the very talented Ellie Hall.
Awesome. Do you want to add anything else, Nicole? Like specifically, like I really love the art. I just want to say, like, there's some paneling in the art when we're seeing, like, when she's recording the content, and there's some like zoom ins that I feel would be like what camera work would be. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I think when Dave and I set out to make this book, we did want to portray, you know, the actual story, but so much of what I was looking for when I was making the art was a replication of this vibe that we were feeling from these specific YouTubers and a bunch of creative projects online. And I really wanted the book to have the feeling of those videos. And so specifically the way that the quote unquote YouTube videos are shot, in the way that they're drawn, the way that they're colored. I worked pretty closely with Ellie on the colors to make sure that it had the correct feeling that we were trying to get with this stuff. All that stuff is really, I think, essential to the way that the story is portrayed. And, you know, all of that means something to Becca, to the other characters. And it tells you like what her life is like in these different stages, how she feels when she's in Arizona, how she feels about living in LA, how Tulip might actually be a different character, a different person than Becca is. And I think all of that plays into the way that it's drawn.
Absolutely. Like, I particularly was very drawn by the close-ups, like when, especially like her lips and the coloring, and how it almost felt a little bit sexualized, because that's kind of what you want. The person shooting the video wants to kind of get that sexual allure kind of going as well. And I thought that was just really kind of haunting in a sense.
Well, when you're trying to make a viral video, unfortunately, sex sells, and that, you know, it really plays into the way that, I mean, you could talk about this through advertising through the ages, but I think particularly with, you know, the social media boom and new type of fame, it's like, there are these people who are famous literally just for being beautiful. They're not really doing anything else. They're reacting to a video, they're lip syncing to a song, they're doing these different things. And the entire fascination with that person is about the way that they look. And that's, I think, could be empowering in a certain light, or it could be really objectifying and sexualized. And I think it's rough. Even, you know, like I was talking to Dave the other day about, I started making TikToks, and I don't love that my TikToks with my face maybe get more views than the ones where I'm just showing my art. Like, that's not a great feeling. Like, I want to be recognized for the things that I'm making, but that's not, unfortunately, how media works these days.
Yeah, I mean, you even could see that, you know, dovetailing off what Nicole said about, like, it's always kind of been there in advertising. It absolutely has. 100% sex has always been leveraged to gain corporate profits off of product creation, right? 100%. You got a watch, you put the watch on a very attractive woman. Coincidentally, she has large breasts, and those breasts are well displayed in the ad. It sells more, right? But in the online ecosystem, everything is so much dumber and flatter and executed in a rush, where it's just like, put Jessica Negri in a Wonder Bra front and center in the thumbnail, and that's it. And it's just, it's so exactly, it's exactly just what is the most primal, just like jet fuel version of the idea that we have, that quite frankly probably needs to be massaged, but we're not going to, because the rawness and the vulgarity of whatever we are utilizing to leverage people's kind of base instincts in order to get their eyeballs on a view screen, that's the world we live in now. And that's not a new idea. It's absolutely been happening for the past 100 years, but it's the dumbest possible version of that idea.
And now it just happens right in our hand, in the palms of our hands.
Yeah. I mean,
you have like 7 seconds now to sell whatever you're selling.
Yeah.
That's significantly less than what TV commercials would have been, a minute, 2 minutes. You know?
And also, like, I think that there's something interesting about this the spatial and size relationships with how marketing and advertising was done prior to now. Like in the 50s, it was billboards, you know, in the 80s, it was movie screens, and you as an individual are smaller than the thing, and you're kind of like sucked up into its world. And so because of that, it needs to be bigger than life in a very alluring way to kind of not be instantly disrespected by the individual. Whereas now it's this big and you're scrolling and it's in your hand, and you're like, in a course of 30 seconds, you see your mom, the president, and like, you know, an ad for, I don't know, some sort of alcohol, like in literally milliseconds. Sometimes it's that, and it engenders a very negative, like, no wonder an entire generation has a stereotype of being entitled. Why wouldn't they, when the entire deeply subjective human experience is ones and zeros in their hand that they can disregard with a mere literal flick of the wrist?
Well, that's all great content. And yeah. Moving on to the next question. Within the back matter of the book, you explore the idea of the question, how far would you go to get what you want, which is a central theme of Everyone is Tulip. Can you talk a little bit about what parallels you see within the comic book industry? Because you did do a good job of comparing your book to Hollywood and the internet and stuff like that. And I think it's a good view of, like, if nobody who's from LA were to read this book, I think you capture LA very well. And like, because a lot of it I was just all like, yeah, I know, like you can't just walk into a place and like get an acting job. It's all about who you know and like what you do and how you get your hands in there. And it's very messy and gritty. And this is, as someone who is not interested in that, is just because I have been in LA my whole life. I know stuff about Hollywood that I'm just like, I don't fucking need this information, but I know more in how to navigate LA than someone who's just coming here and they're all of a sudden hit with just the immensity of Los Angeles, which to me is just like, oh, it's not a big deal.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I think you know, your question of like comparing Hollywood or the ecosystems of kind of power manipulation and people kind of using financial structures and business hierarchies for their own potential kind of steps up. I think it's pretty clear to me, at least, that absolutely exists in comics. It's just a small, shitty version of it. You know, it's like a lot of, you know, there are a lot of publishers. There's a whole like kind of wing of direct market publishers who don't treat creators well. They market themselves as pro creator and market their books as creator owned, but all of those books are owned 25% by the artist, 25% by the writer, and 50% by the publisher. I don't know, if I bought a car and I only own 25% of it, I kind of feel like I don't own that fucking car, you know?
Yeah.
And so these are, you know,
that is a good comparison.
Thank you. It's a depressing one, but
yeah.
But these are kind of the, you know, we've been doing some interviews for the book, and I think a lot of people have pointed out that Becca is from Arizona, and they kind of ask, oh, is she like a stand-in for you? And I'm like, no, but the book itself is deeply autobiographical to both Nicole and I, in that we are constantly confronted with borderline no-win scenarios. You know, you're dealing with publishers, you're dealing with printers, you're dealing with you know, potential steps in positive, cool directions, but there's always a catch. There's always, well, you don't own the rights to this thing, or, well, we're going to need you to do this thing that you kind of think is really shitty, you know? And it's an ever evolving conversation between the two of us of like, what is the right path? What is the, it seems difficult today, but in 5 years, it will be the right decision. And we've had that conversation so many times. Like when we were first kind of getting started, when we were on the juncture of, we had been self-publishing for a few years and we were trying to get a book picked up by a publisher, we got offered a deal but they would have owned 50% of it. And we really, really went back and forth on that of like, this sucks. Like, this goes against everything we believe in, but it's an inroad.
Mm-hmm.
But fucking Siegel and Schuster, like, you know, they sold Superman for $130. And that's a black mark, a stain on the soul of the medium that I don't think will ever accurately be repaid or undone. And it is the cardinal sin of comics to me personally. That's the original sin that has allowed so many despotic Cespulian assholes to rip people off and not feel bad about it because they're like, well, it's been happening. I don't know.
I mean, to me, the whole fact that there has to be an organization called Heroes Initiative to actually take care of these amazing creators who gave the world so many just iconic stories and characters and experiences, but we have to raise money for them so they can pay their hospital bills or even their rent.
It's despicable. It's
It is,
despicable.
100%. Yes.
So as a creator, you have to do everything that you can do to not die alone on a park bench while still getting work and finding inroads and finding projects that are going to lift you up and get you new opportunities. And that balancing act is so hard.
Yeah.
We always say there are no true wins in comics because every deal has some sort of caveat, some sort of thing that's not perfect. And, you know, you just kind of have to weigh your options and decide which things you're willing to give up, which things you're willing to keep or fight for. And like Dave said, we didn't take that deal and just kept doing what we were doing in an effort to push through and hope that the next offer would be a better thing. I think I turned down like 4 major books last year because they weren't what I wanted to make. And I didn't want my career to be defined by these things, or they were work for hire and I wanted to have ownership, or all these different reasons. And it's really hard to turn down 4 jobs and then, you know, maybe never have work again. You know, you never know. That's the problem with being a freelancer. And I think this applies to comics, but it also applies to basically every other creative industry. There are ones that are protected, you know, like they don't have an amazing time, but animators have an animation guild. They have things that protect them, kind of frameworks and structures that get them healthcare, get them paid, get them this and that. Comics has none of that. We have no union. We have no support structure. It's all individuals on their own and word of mouth, which if you don't know the right people, you're not going to know that you probably shouldn't take a 50% deal. Or if you do take a 50% deal, know what you're getting into, you know? It's really kind of frustrating, I think, for a lot of creators.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a retailer, I've grown to know so many creators, from the small little person who's begging me to have it on my shelf because it's their, you know, their first foray into the industry to, you know, bigger names. And the story is always the same, which shocked me as someone new to the industry. It doesn't matter that you're writing ASM or Superman or whatever, or it's your own creative property that you're trying to put. You don't know where your next paycheck is coming from. You don't know if you'll even have a next project, depending on where the wind flows. For, you know, what people are interested in. And that blew my mind, quite honestly, to find that out.
Yeah, the most surreal part of this whole kind of fucking facade that is the comic book industry. It's not an industry. It's just like a bunch of people who are friends hanging out.
Yeah.
And all of those friends get fucked over. Like, that's all it is. And like, you know, the thing that's so bizarre about it is how it's almost like you would think once your first book gets picked up, then your second book is a little bit easier, and your third book is a little bit easier, and your fourth book is and so on and so on and so forth. In my experience, it's not that. It's almost once you get your first book picked up, then your second book is just a tad harder, and you're just a tad harder. And then finally, once you're in like 6, 7, 8, whatever it is, it's almost like it's just a testament to the individual's sheer will that the projects get off the ground. Like, and I think that's actually a big problem in comics. Like through one lens, it's beautiful that everybody loves the medium so much that they're here just to, revel in the great lineage of sequential storytelling. Through another lens, it's, oh, look, only the people who are religious zealots are in the room. Everyone else is gone to animation, gone to film, gone to storyboarding, gone to, I don't know, work in a fucking day job because it's easier.
Yeah.
Like I love that on one hand, and I really I weep for the medium because there are so many amazing cartoonists who have just been siphoned off into other industries and will never see work from them of substantial weight again. Like Lamar Abrams, I love Lamar Abrams. Like the books that he did about the little, like, what's it called? Reboot Man or whatever. He's like a little Mega Man style guy that Ad House put out like 10 years ago. And they're amazing. They're so funny and so inventive and so just uniquely Lamar Abrams. And no one else could make that comic. And that's the type of work I like. I like books that feel like they're a telepathic link between my brain and somebody else from a very disparate walk of life. And he, good for him. He's like won a fucking Emmy and shit. He works on Steven Universe and like all these amazing cartoons, and he's probably gonna buy a fucking house or something. I don't know what he's doing, but he's like, he's
Did he just get married?
We're gonna say he did, and good for you, Lamar. I don't know if you did or didn't, but we're gonna say you did, and it was a gorgeous wedding, and I liked all of the photos, even though I didn't because I'm not aware of this. But like that's what I'm saying. Like the world needs 50, needs 2,000, needs 100,000 Lamar Abrams in comics. Movies and shit, it's fine. Like that's cool, but your creative vision gets watered down so much because you have to run through a linebacker field of like shitty dude bro executives who are like, I don't know, this is kind of hard edged. This might offend some people. It's like good. Let's mix it up.
There's kind of two options, right? We either lose people to animation because they can actually get paid and have healthcare, or in the industry and get burned out and then die young or something, or their hand hurts so bad they can't make comics anymore. Like this last year had incredible creative burnout and have barely been able to make anything because I was working on 2 books at once. I was drawing Shadow of the Batgirl and Everyone is Tulip at the same time because that's what you have to do to pay your rent. And I mean, I was fortunate to have those 2 projects. Like I the whole time was like, I'm grateful that I have a job during the pandemic. And then like 6 months in, I was like, I can't draw anymore. What happened?
It's a hard industry.
Tricky to balance that.
It really is. And I really appreciate the candor when creators are open to that, because I don't think a lot of our listeners, for one, and readers of comics in general know what goes on behind the scenes. I know they definitely don't know what goes on behind the scenes in the retail business. So I'm pretty sure they don't know what happens in the creative aspect either. And I think it needs to be talked about. It really does, because if you're going to enjoy it, you need to be able to appreciate it and also support them in ways that will help them, the creators, be compensated in the way that they deserve.
I think that the craziest thing about this whole conversation to me is that everyone in comics, almost to a person, is like the nicest, kindest, most beautiful soul. And it's just because there's no money, everybody gets pushed to these extremes. Like even people I vehemently disagree with on their whatever the comics equivalent terms of like their politics. Like they run a company and they have this deal that treats people this way. Like I've met a lot of those people, and because I personally know that I'm never going to work for them, I kind of make, I'm fucking around. I'm like joking around, being like, hey, corporate comics pirate or whatever. And most people are just super nice, and we get in these great conversations, and there's a really beautiful back and forth exchanging of ideas of, like a debate, you know, and in a healthy way, not an argument, but a back and forth where they have a distinctly different viewpoint than I do, and we can walk away friends. And that's great, because there's so many people like that, and also just people that are just like, fuck this conversation, just great humans in comics, because everybody loves the medium and just wants to see the medium grow and succeed. But all of those people are like inside of a punji pit. So you just like, you try to walk in and you just get fucking paled. Like it's the worst.
I mean, I think the problem is that there is a lot of these kind of systems that were set up already. And so anybody entering new into comics is quote unquote working within a predisposed system. This is how companies do it. This is how they make their money, blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is that those publishers are also just trying to make ends meet. And there is no money in comics. You know, like the company that you think that makes the most money, they probably don't, you know? And so they're trying to work these ways and figure out these ways to make a buck, same as anyone else. The problem is that in order to do that, they're kind of abusing the people who are actually creating the things for them. They would have nothing without these people.
Right.
And so in order to, you know, pay their bills or be able to put out a next book, this is specifically about some of the smaller publishers. They're like, okay, well, we're going to put out this book for you. We're taking all the risks. So we're going to take a percentage of your IP rights, because if we are able to sell it and make a movie or a TV show, that's where the money is. But the problem is that with publishing, they really should only be purchasing the publishing rights, and that any money that they make from the publishing, you know, whatever the split is, that should be theirs. That's what they're purchasing. They shouldn't be purchasing the intellectual property, because that is owned and created by the creators, you know?
Yeah,
and
just because you paid a printing bill doesn't mean you're entitled to write a royalty on the board game rights and the video game rights and the fucking sneaker decal rights and the, you know, San Diego exclusive shoelace rights. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
What the fuck is this? You paid like $4,000 on a printer bill. Like, I literally have run Kickstarters that have paid more for printing than I know major distributed books have paid, because it's just, it's I mean, it is not cheap. It is expensive. It is hard. It is an unloved aspect of the industry. There's no one who's just like, yeah, print press manager at IDW, you really killed it on this one. Like, that just doesn't happen. But just because that person did their job doesn't mean that creator X or Y should be basically pushed out of feature film adaptation deals, which the industry at large is already going to try and do. So that now you're fighting two entities. You're fighting the publisher that is going to get the lion's share of the money, and you're fighting the actual Hollywood industry, which like broke every major creator that has ever made a movie or acted in anything. Like, if it broke Orson Welles, it's probably going to break you too, you know?
Oh my god, that just reminds me of like Hellraiser. So the first two movies are really good. The second one, Clive Barker still had creative rights over his characters, but after 3 through 7, I think they are, he had absolutely, because he had sold his characters off, and they just completely ruined the whole concept of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
So and it's sad, and you know, like, it's staring you in the face, and it's really kind of depressing. And I you know, when I hear other creators like in movie talks, like, I'm like, I hope that they don't, you know, take control of your character, because, you know, you have a great story, you know, you imagined it, you lived it, you cried over it, you know, bled over it, and, you know, now it's in talks for movies, and, you know, we may not get what we read from you.
Yeah, completely.
That's the problem with those 50% deals, is that they're not 50%, they're 50% and creative control.
Right.
So they're really 51%. So as a creator, you're basically giving up say with what happens to these characters in the future.
Yeah, you're kind of, those deals are kind of like writing yourself a lottery ticket and saying, I hope that the Powerball payout is so large that when that dump truckload of money goes to the, you know, the publisher, then gets filtered down through the agents, then the executive producer fees, then the artist's cut, and then finally gets to me, that percentage is going to be enough to really make it worth it. And quite frankly, most options are like 10 grand. Like, they're not that they're not that big. So I mean, maybe whatever that is, 25% of 10 grand is like a lot of money to you, and you would like just love to have that $2,500, and that would be worth working for 6 months and then touring to conventions and then emailing retailers and then trying to interface with every one of your friends and family you've ever had even a passing relationship with to get them to try and go into a comic book store and purchase a book through an antiquated pre-order system. Maybe that $2,500 is really worth it for you. But for me personally, maybe this is a position of privilege, I'm like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the reality is that making books just takes an incredible amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's just the making of the book takes that much time. But once you add all of the other stuff, all of the emails, all of the press, all of the advertising, all of the, touring, all of that stuff, if you were to factor a page rate into all of that,
Right.
not a living wage, my friends.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. So I want to move on to the idea that you talk about in the back matter, that is art is time travel. I had to read that so many times. Like my mind was like I felt like when I went to the observatory and we did a like they had a space-time continuum like show, and I just could not wrap my head around it. And I was reading this and I read everything and I read it again. I was like, I need to ask them about this. So, can you explain to our listeners a little about what that meant to you as a creator? Art is time travel, and how that concept actively affects your writing, whether it was Everyone is Tulip or any writing that you do.
Yeah, so the title of the essay at the back of Everyone is Tulip is, as you pointed out, art is time travel. And the underlying idea is that the production timeline for making comics is very strange, because you work on a project, especially as the writer, you work on it for 3, 4, 5 months, whatever you work on it for. And then the artists and the colorists take over and they work on it for however long they work on it for, probably years. And you evolve as a person, you grow as a person, you have new experiences, you change over the course of that book being slowly built, like, a cathedral in Eastern Europe in like the 1500s. It emotionally takes that 500 years of like, even though you're passively involved, or I'm a cartoonist too. So even if I'm actively involved in it, it still is this slow build where you're brick by brick building a story. And 9 times out of 10, hopefully, if you've done your right job right as a person, you've evolved and you're a different person at the end of it than you were at the beginning. And then the book sits in a server somewhere for 6 months while the publisher does all of their stuff. And that sounded passive aggressive. I didn't mean that way. That's part of the process of this, where you put the book in a server and then it takes a while, and then eventually that server gives it to the printer and then they make the book, right? And so then there's another period where you're growing and evolving and changing, and you're experiencing the world, and you're having new thoughts, and you're having regrets about the book, and you're like, oh fuck, if only I had done this. So this thing ties into the theme so well, and I didn't see that when we were making it. Fuck. And then the book comes out and you're instantly pulled back to who you were X number of years ago, and you're forced to confront that, or it's an exciting experience of remembering who you were. And then the book goes out into the world, and all these people who've never seen it before are unaware of that invisible temple pyramid of experience and sweat and blood and tears that produced that work. And they're seeing it for the first time, and it's a present thing. It's not something from the past. It came out this week, in air quotes. We've been working on Tulip for like 4.5 years, but it, is a brand new comic, which for most people it is. It's this thing that they're like, oh, cool, this came out. Great. This isn't a Hellboy. And so, then you have to interact with the object in this very different, distinct way, where you have to take all of that experience you've had put it aside, and you have to interact with it as though it is a fresh new thing. And you do interviews and you talk about it and you learn about your own work through almost public therapy, where you're talking about the book, you're talking about what it means, you're talking about why you made it. And sometimes at the beginning of those press tour things, you don't even know. You're just like, I don't fucking know. I just wanted to make it, man. No. But you can't say that in an interview. So you say, oh, well, actually, I thought it was a scathing critique of late stage capitalism and the democratic rot that we are currently living through, or whatever the reason was. And then, so that's the past and the present. But then there's this amazing thing where throughout those previous steps, you're aware that there are going to be people in the future who read this book and are able to absorb either passively or actively who you are while you're making it. You're making a time capsule for future generations. Those future generations could be 5 people, they could be 5,000 people, or hopefully 5 million. That'd be really cool. It'd be really cool if we sold 5 million books. That'd be great. If all 5 million people watching this right now could just go buy books, that'd be great. But so those
the be in the millions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that the toggling through those different, almost kind of like tenses, like past, present, and future. You're simultaneously, as a creator, living in all 3 of those at once, and as a viewer, you also live in all 3 of those at once, because you are aware that this book was drawn and it is 170 pages or whatever. So there's no way somebody could do it in a day. So that means there is a past to it. You are aware that you're reading it because it came out this Wednesday. Hey, fucking comic book stores. Yeah. And also, you're aware that this book is going to exist after you. And that's that trippy concept of the fact that there is going to be, I think everything else that Nicole and I have done could very well fade into obscurity and never be seen again. But just off of the premise that our book is being put out shoulder to shoulder with Black Hammer and Sabretooth Swordsman and all of these amazing books that are Sin City, Jeff Darrow's work, all of these amazing creators and books that I am kind of still just like, I don't know how I tricked anyone into publishing our weirdo internet performance art comic, but fuck yeah. All of those things. This book, Nicole's famous. She worked on a fucking Bat book. Like, there's going to be people who are like, yes, Nicole Goux. When she dies, she will be known for the Bat. Whereas, like, nobody's going to give a shit about me. That Star Trek book I wrote, like, I think it's great, but the Star Trek readership is particularly small. So, but there's a very deep-seated sense of pride and joy that I derive from the fact that I've been working for so long to try and get anybody to give any amount of shits about anything I do. And the fact that this book now lives in the past, the present, and the future, and hopefully will, hopefully Elon Musk will take a copy to Mars, like, it's so that's kind of the idea of that end essay is expressing a sense of gratitude to the universe for, I come from a small town where the life expectancy isn't that great. A bunch of my friends from high school are literally dead, and a lot more are in the military. And I consider myself very fortunate and very blessed to have escaped that morass and am living here, literally living out my dreams. Like, it sounds fucking cheesy and like no one wants to hear this, but it's true. Like, all I've ever wanted to do was live in a big city, have cool art friends, and make shit. And I'm doing all of those things. And like, it's so weird. It's so weird to me. Also, Nicole's pretty rad. She's all right. She's cool.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I think all of what Dave said is kind of like the major thoughts, and particularly this idea of a time capsule of we are making this thing and it has a past, a present, and a future, but we're making a thing in a moment that will never exist again. And so this thing now exists, it's out in the world, and people 10 years from now, people 100 years from now, theoretically, if it doesn't disintegrate, can go back and read it and understand something about this moment in time. And I think that is particularly important with this story because it is so much about the moment that we're living in. So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also the really personal aspect of it for me and Dave, where I worked on this book for 3-4 years, whatever it was.
90 years. You worked on the book for 90 years.
And while you're working on it, you're just thinking about the book and what needs to be done and what next page you need to do and how many inks you have left. And you're just kind of focusing on the book itself. And then you go into these interviews later and people ask you, so where did this idea come from? And you have to go, oh yeah, 5 years ago, Dave and I were on a train and talking about these weird YouTubers that we were watching. Weird thing of like, I don't have a particularly good memory, but this book is a document of a time in my life previous to now. And something that was really fun and enjoyable and an interactive process of creation that I now have this physical document of. And anytime someone talks about the book, whether they know it or not, they're talking about that moment that Dave and I were on a train brainstorming this book. And it's a really weird thing to think about.
Yeah,
It really is. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I have a lot of artist friends, and whenever they look back at their work that they did, not even from like last year, like from a couple months ago, they're like, oh, I hate it. Like I could have done this, I could have done this, I could have done this. Or some of them are just like, man, I knew how to draw 5 years ago and now I can't draw. And I just look at them and I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? I can't make this. This is amazing. But it's so funny because especially for something like that, especially I think for artists who work in the industry and they look back at their work, they're all like, man, I could have done so many things different. And I know for some of them, they look at their artwork and they're like, cringe. But move on.
Well, and like for me, so this book is coming out now. I started this book 5 years ago. You know how much I've developed as an artist since I started this book?
Yeah.
And it's just coming out. I have to look at those drawings and kind of take into account that like I have developed since then, and I'm not the same person I was when I started drawing this book. The book Monsters just came out.
Barry Windsor Smith.
Barry Windsor Smith, and he worked on that for what, 10 years?
No, dude, it's like 25.
25 years. So I look at that book as an artist and I'm like, how did you do this and not change your style or develop or get interested in other things or drift off in another direction? And maybe he did at different points, but he made a thing, whether you think it's cohesive or not. He made a single book that is in one form over 25 years. And to me, that's impossible, because I started really drawing comics 7 years ago. I look at the comics I was drawing 7 years ago and I go, who drew that? I don't recognize that person. I don't want to draw like that person. I mean, there are things within those drawings that I enjoy, or there's stuff that I'm like, ooh, I wish I could still do that. How did I come up with that 5 years ago, 10 years ago? But I am a fundamentally different person. Well, maybe not fundamentally, but I am a different person than I was when I was drawing those things. And to even from the beginning to the end of the book change that much, and then have to put that thing out in the world and be like, here it is. I made this. I hope you like it.
My husband Eddie is a creator and he does a webcomic. And when he first started it, we'll look back because he prints them out every year as an annual. But we go back and we look at that first one and they're so rough, and the characters compared to now are so underdeveloped, and he always likens it to those very first iterations of The Simpsons on the Tracy Ullman show.
Totally.
And how look where The Simpsons are now, and just over time. And he has developed and grown so much, but it's so interesting to hear other creators say the same thing. And honestly, this conversation is something I've never thought about the creative process. And I definitely think it's going to affect me as a reader, because it's to get into the mind of the creator in that way is something I've never even entertained before. So thank you for that. That definitely.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, until we really started seriously making comics, I kind of didn't really think about it either, because while there is sort of that component to self-publishing on a small scale where you like spend 6 months working on 20 pages or whatever, and then you print it out at Kinko's, it doesn't have the same effect because there's not like a 6 month printer window. There's not the day it comes out in comic book stores. There's not the unseen universe of it's everywhere. Like it's in Barnes and Nobles. Like that side of it just opened this thing up for me personally anyway, where it was like, all I've ever wanted was a book to come out of fucking Barnes and Noble. And now it is. And I'm like, oh, and it's having this weird effect on me where I'm thinking about this future world where if I was a teenager right now and this book came out, it would blow my mind. I would love this. Like the book that like shaped me in high school was Wet Moon by Sophie Campbell. It's amazing, you know, and it's all honestly not that far off from the stuff we've made, because low key, I'm just ripping off Sophie Campbell because she's
That's crazy. And you know, since I know you guys wrote this story about performance artists in YouTube, since then I came across a video where it was actually telling me about how parents kind of make their kids become like either YouTube or TikTok personalities, and how they're using their kids to be kind of like their voice out into like this universe. And it was really sad, and I was like, man, I just read that book, Everyone is Tulip, and it kind of mirrors that evolution of what's going on with social media and how we're handling the ability to be on all the time. Like we're always on, you know, streaming something, reading something, listening to something on our phones. So that was just kind of like, oh my God, that's freaking crazy.
Yes, low key, my iPhone tells me I spend 8 to 10 hours a fucking day on my phone. I'm like, that's a full-time job. No wonder I don't have time to do anything.
There's this, I think, Instagram baby that Dave and I watch fairly regularly. His name is Kobe YN, and he's like one of those cooking babies. His mom, you know, gives him ingredients and he makes a pizza or whatever it is. And he's adorable. He's so cute and it makes me so happy. But this kid, you can see him watching himself in the camera, in the viewer, watching himself perform. And he's like 8 months when they started doing this. He's like a really young baby. So that is going to be built into his DNA from the time that he is a teeny tiny baby, of this sort of self-observance, always checking on himself, always looking at how he looks, always thinking about how he's performing for people. And while I think he's cute and adorable and I love to watch those videos, it also makes me really sad.
Yes.
It's like that kid, I think Dave and I are the last generation.
Their therapists are gonna have a field day.
Therapists are gonna have a field day.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of the last generation that really got to grow up without screens. Like I started really being on the internet when I was in middle school, you know, chat rooms and
same.
Stuff. So anybody younger than us is like internet from day one. You're on the screens 24/7. And I think it really warps you. And I don't necessarily want to say that that's a bad thing. Do I personally think it's kind of a bad thing? Yeah. Do I think that there are going to be healthy, satisfied people in the future? Probably. But I think just fundamentally, it's not going to be the same experience of life as it was before.
Right. Most definitely. Whew, that went dark really fast.
Funny because you guys say this and I'm just like, if by the time I'm like 60, if I make it that far, and if I'm still on the internet, I'm like, what the fuck? I want to be 60 and living out in the woods surrounded by books. That's it. Like, I will turn in my phone like I'm quitting a job like to somebody, and I'll be like, all right, I'm done, and then I'm just gonna like retire.
That being said, one of my favorite things on TikTok is older people being like, look at my outfit, look at this thing I made, because it's so sincere, and I really like it. I don't know. I'm part of the problem.
Well, guys, let's give the creative team behind Everything is Tulip some love. Please tell our listeners or our audience how the partnership with your team happened, and how are the ways that the rest of the team helped out and bring your story to life in a way you might not have expected before starting this.
Well, Dave and I have been pretty collaborative for a long time. So I think this book, up until the newer stuff that we're making now, we've kind of gotten progressively more collaborative as we've gone on. So the first thing he gave me was just a script. Here it is, draw it. And from then on, I've had kind of some more creative input in the earlier stages, coming up with ideas, coming up with things, reading scripts, asking for changes, these kinds of things. So that's kind of how we've worked. But the other people who helped us out on this book are Ellie Hall, who is the colorist, who we actually met her at a school talk that we were doing, and she ended up doing an incredible job. She and I had a lot of back and forth with the color. I had set up some, I think 8 pages of color beforehand, and we had a lot of talks about, the themes of the book and how the color should work. But she really took off with it and made an incredible story with color that I think, if we had anyone else do it, it really just wouldn't have looked like the same book. I think readers a lot of the time don't understand how important color is and how much a colorist can change the feel of a book. And I think this book in particular relies really heavily on color. And she just did a fantastic job, and we were so happy to have her on. And then there are the other people involved in the book, which is Connor, our editor, who absolutely made this book happen at Dark Horse. He came to us because he had read Fuck Off Squad, and he liked it and was kind of like, what else you got? And we were like, well, actually, we got this thing like halfway done. And the creative freedom that Connor and Dark Horse allowed us was just incredible. I think there's a lot of editors out there who would try and mold and change a book to fit what the company wants or what they think will sell or something like that. And we really just were able to make the book that we wanted. And Connor just went to bat for us, being like, this is a book that we should be putting out right now. This is what people want. This is what's going to sell. This is an important story that needs to be told. And he really was just amazing in that. And then there's also the designers who did a fantastic job. Like, honestly, the design of the essay in the back of the book, I was so excited when I saw that. It's beautiful. Dave and I were just absolutely thrilled with the way that all of that came together. So, it's, people talk about creative teams and they think, writer, artist, colorist, maybe letterer. I lettered this book, so there isn't one other than me. But I think a lot of time they discount editors and designers and all these other, pre-production people and all of that stuff, that there are so many people involved in the creation of a book, especially at a publisher the size of Dark Horse, that it really takes a whole team to make something like this happen.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned the editor, because I always tell people you need an editor.
Oh,
you need an editor.
Absolutely.
Like, scrape up enough money to pay for an editor or something, because it will make your book better.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. And Connor was, like Nicole said, he was a stalwart ally in this process for sure. He really defended the book. Like, I don't know that Dark Horse would have published a book like this without Connor finding it, bringing it to them, making all of the higher ups look at it and say, look, I know it's not, our normal fare, but we're starting this kind of OGN line. We're starting to push into the graphic novel market and the book trade. Like, this could be our Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. This could be our This One Summer. Like, let's really, let these kids swing for the fences.
I think a lot of people don't understand that, convincing an editor to pick up your book, that's just the first line of defense. And then your editor has to go to the higher ups and the teams and the salespeople and convince them that they should be putting out the book. So your editor is really on your side pushing for this to happen. And, you know, obviously it's a little different with every company. They're different sizes. There's less people, there's whatever. But at a company like Dark Horse, you know, Connor had to convince the rest of the team that this is the book that should be made right now. You know, they have so many options. There's so many people making amazing things. Which one of these are you going to do? And so your editor is there fighting for you to be able to make the book that you want to make. Theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah, theoretically.
All right. So moving on to our next section. Sorry, my words are not working right now. Cheesemith. So this segment gives you the opportunity to share any stories, comics, projects that you are working on currently that you haven't shared. We'd love to hear all about Forest Hills Bootleg Society.
Yeah, Forest Hills Bootleg Society is our new chonky boy. It's a 200 and some odd page.
And I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 210 page original graphic novel, which is going to be put out by Simon and Schuster next summer.
Wow.
It follows 4 teenage girls in a conservative Christian boarding school in middle of nowhere, California, as they start a hentai distribution ring.
Oh,
That's the reaction we want.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
Okay, I want that book. Oh my god. This is just high school all over again. What I'm hearing. Except it's me and friends like secretly swapping yaoi comics.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Completely.
Oh my god.
So yeah, the book is you know, going back to the idea of art is time travel. Forest Hills is done. Like it's completely finished, and you know, Nicole and I are working on whatever the next thing is, but that book's not going to come out until next summer of 2022. So you know, it's very cool. I'm very excited about it. I think we leveled up again, and by we I mean Nicole, because I'm just a one-trick pony. But I'm very excited about the book. I think it's going to be hopefully we're going to get banned in some places. That'll be cool.
Hopefully by then we can have signings in the store, because I am so excited for that.
Yeah, same.
Like just you describing that immediately, I'm just like, I'm hooked. I want to read this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're both very excited about it, and we're both eager for everybody to see the pages, because Nicole really, she knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, I just turned in those pages to the designer today, and they've mostly been done for several months. So this is just a little kind of view into how long all this comic stuff takes. It's, you know, I think we waited 7 months or something for our contract. Then I drew the book. Then I, you know, waited on notes and changes and things for a while. And then I'm just turning in my pages now, and the book doesn't come out for an entire other year. So in case you're wondering how long things take. It's a long time.
Takes a while.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely something to be looking forward to. And I'm happy to hear that you're already on to your next project. Anything you can share?
I have a book that I've written and drawn, which I'm waiting on the publisher for a contract for. It's like a girl adventurer, Nancy Drew, Buckaroo Banzai type comic. And then I have sold another project to Dark Horse, which I'm very excited about.
Oh,
but
nice.
has not been announced yet, so I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not. But I think it's going to be cool. And,
Coming soon, TM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the weird thing about comics sometimes, is it's like there are these things that are kind of expected, where it's just like, oh yeah, don't talk about that until we announce it. It's like,
Yeah.
What does that mean though? Like, should I not tell people that I'm working on it? Should I not tell people who the artist is? Should I not tell people tell me what I'm supposed to do? What is going on?
Sometimes there's literally an NDA, and sometimes it's an unspoken NDA where they're just like, you know, like don't tell people this.
Yeah. So yeah, I have 2 books that are working their way through the process.
More than that, really.
Nice. And Nicole, how about you? Do you have anything that you can share?
I am working on some personal projects, which are not secrets, but not things I'm really talking about yet because I'm still working through them. And then, Dave and I have a couple pitches that we're working on. We have one that's out at a publisher right now, so we'll see what happens with that. Yeah, there's Forest Hills is the big one that we can talk about, and then there's some behind the scenes stuff that's coming. I promise there's more coming.
Well, it's nice to hear that you still are churning out those ideas, both of you. So we also have a segment on our podcast called Juntos y Fuertes, which translates to Together and Strong. And that is our segment that highlights noteworthy endeavors by members of marginalized groups that we think deserve support. So are there any projects or programs that you would like to plug that you feel like need our support?
I would first say what I had just said 5 minutes ago, which is that, Sophie Campbell is a trans creator who has made many great comics. She's the writer on and artist of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles right now. But the thing that I personally loved from her was her 8-volume gay romance comic set in a Rhode Island art school called Wet Moon. It's really cool. If you like things like, Ingrid Goes West, or maybe slice of life dramas about trying to figure out who you are and your context within the greater whole of humanity. Or if you just like comics about cute girls sitting on couches arguing about Star Trek, Wet Moon it'll do you right.
It's definitely a favorite at our shop. The people come and ask for it all the time.
I am so impressed because I don't think I've ever met anyone in the real world who actually has read the book. I'm always the one being like, a Cleo love drop. And they're like, oh, all right. Yeah, sure. All right. Whatever, dude.
I would say the publisher of our comic Fuck Off Squad is called Sprocket Bicycle Club, and they're kind of an indie punk publisher out of San Francisco. And most of the people who make books for them are marginalized in some way or another. They make a lot of really interesting comics. And in fact, their shop just got robbed a couple months ago. So
wow.
They could definitely use some help. And they put out incredible books. They put out our book, which is about gay skater kids. But they have a ton of really amazing creators who are various types of marginalized. And so any support you can give to Silver Sprocket.
Yeah, their website is silversprocket.net.
Awesome. Jen's going to be moving up to the Bay Area here pretty soon, so she's going to have to check them out.
You should check it out because they have an actual shop, and they sell Silver Sprocket books, but they also sell some for second stuff, some like
weird self-published stuff that you can't find anywhere else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jen was just saying today, I hope I can find a shop in up there north that she feels comfortable with. Well, she was saying that maybe she could work for, but also just a shop that is just like welcoming and comforting in a place that she belonged. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Silver Sprocket doesn't do like weekly issues, but they are super welcoming and they have a ton of amazing books.
Yeah, I've heard of Silver Sprocket. We've ordered some books from them, or at least Kristen has ordered from them after my grand insistence. But like I said, I wasn't aware that they had a physical shop location, so I will definitely check it out. I'm going to be moving to San Jose.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Are you moving up there for any specific reason, or just trying to get away? Oh, for school. Oh, cool. Yes. What are you going to school for?
I'm going to San Jose State University, and I'm going for creative and technical writing.
Hey, that's great.
The creative writing for myself, the technical writing to make money.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Backup plan.
Yeah.
Good backup plan.
Yeah. Well, guys, where can our listeners or viewers in this case find your projects or future projects, websites, social media? When does the next issue for Home hit?
Oh, no, that's different.
I'm so sorry.
Not even the same.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was like,
what
I'm
does
reading
that
my
mean?
thing. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute. Typo. So sorry, guys. So yeah, social media. What? Just give us all the deets.
Sure. Yeah, sure. You can find me on the internet at heydavebaker.com or on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at xdavebakerx. Or if you want to listen to me and my friend Andrew Price ramble about weird or obscure topics, you can listen to my podcast, Deep Cuts.
Nice.
cool.
Very
So
nice.
you can find Everyone is Tulip at all comic shops now, everywhere, and at all bookstores and on Amazon and all of that on July 20th, which is
Tomorrow.
Oh my God, tomorrow. That's weird. I hadn't thought about that. So which is tomorrow. And then you can find me at NicoleGoux.com, spelled G-O-U-X, and TikTok and Twitter at Nicole Goux and Instagram at NGoux.
Awesome. That is super awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of this awesome interview. Thank you so much for being on our show. We really appreciate it. Thanks for working with the schedule, miscommunication.
totally.
Totally
No worries.
appreciate it. And loved the book. Loved. I mean, I kind of felt a little kind of like spent afterwards. I was kind of like a little bit like, this is so like haunting, like I just couldn't shake it, like, and that's kind of the mark of a really good story, because sometimes like I'm still thinking about it like days after I've read it, and it's so haunting and just beautiful. But thanks again for coming on our Las Platicas, and we have been your hosts. I'm Sarah.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Jen.
I'm Dave.
I'm Nicole.
And you should definitely subscribe to the show. You know, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to get notified when new videos go up. Come on, don't be that guy who just like doesn't subscribe to shit. Don't be that person. That person sucks. Be the change you want to be in the world. Hit that fucking bell, dude. Get the fucking ding. Come on. Leave a review on iTunes and shit, because like it's weird. But that shit actually really helps. I know this from running my podcast. The more reviews you have, the higher you rank. If you get a lot of reviews early on in a show's life, you get featured on the new and noteworthy tab, and that can really help spread awareness about the show and get a massive following. And then everybody in the call, minus me and Nicole, would become millionaires. So don't be fucking stingy. Come on, leave a fucking review. It takes like 30 seconds.
Yay!
Yay, I love it. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.